I am Axie Navas. I have the honor of serving as the first director of outdoor recreation in the great state of New Mexico. Serve at the pleasure of the governor, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, within the Economic Development Department. And I wanted to start my portion with a land acknowledgement for where I am based, recognizing that people in this room are all over the country, maybe all over the world. So I'd like to start with that. And then Ángel, if that works for you, I'll hand it over to you for intros and some overview about the Outdoor Equity Fund. But so yes, I do, beginning this session with the land acknowledgement, I do think it's especially relevant since many of the lands and waters we're talking about at this event and in our professional lives, the places that we look to for solace are in many cases the unceded territory of Indigenous people in New Mexico and the rest of the United States. Like I said, since we're located all over the US, I want to recognize where I am based currently. And then I ask for folks, if you're comfortable doing it, to do the same in the chat. So I live, work, and recreate on the occupied Indigenous land of the Pueblo and Jicarilla Apache peoples, while understanding that state and county borders and the concept of private property that they delineate is really a colonial construction. I acknowledge that this land that we call Taos County in northern New Mexico today is occupied territory of the Pueblo people. To put that in perspective, Taos Pueblo is located about 10 miles from where I sit now. And last September, the Pueblo celebrated the 50th anniversary of the return of Blue Lake. This legislation marked the culmination of decades of activism to restore these lands to the Pueblo. And as a representative of state government and sitting in this chair at the moment in the Outdoor Recreation Division, I am grateful to learn from and be inspired every day by the Pueblo's committed stewardship of that land and the surrounding land. So I in the office stand in solidarity with Indigenous peoples movements, and I commit the state office to supporting Indigenous-led solutions, land management practices, businesses, and organizations in our state. To me, I think that includes recognizing and grappling with the very real impact outdoor recreationists can have on Pueblo land. And to that end, the Outdoor Recreation Division is committed to constantly evaluating its role in growing this outdoor economy in New Mexico in a way that takes its lead from the Pueblos as the original stewards of these lands. And what we're here to talk about today, the Outdoor Equity Fund, acknowledges and builds off that legacy, I think, in a very direct way. And I want to hold space for that thought as we begin our discussion for today. I invite you to do your own land acknowledgement in the chat for wherever you're based. And if you could also include the name of an Indigenous leader, an author, a business owner, a politician, a teacher, a chef, a parent who has inspired you. And so with that, I do want to turn it back over to you, Ángel, for your intro and to kick us off about the Outdoor Equity Fund discussion and your leadership of that work here in New Mexico and in the country as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Axie. And as I'm just clicking through the screens here, so good to see some familiar faces and some new ones. Excited to share this space with everybody. Yes, as I've never been able to work in a political environment like the one that we have, I also want to walk the walk, right? And also just simply acknowledge that I am calling in from the broken treaties and the stolen lands of the Hornada Mogollon down here in southern New Mexico. I am the executive director of the Nuestra Tierra conservation project, where we wake up every day to ensure, to not only ensure that historically, deliberately overlooked communities have access to the outdoors, but that these communities have access to the political process and public land management system. We do this through advocacy, education, and people empowerment. Yes, we're all here because of the New Mexico first of its kind Outdoor Equity Fund, something that originated on the back of a napkin when a number of friends located throughout the state of New Mexico needed to look at the tools in our tool belt because the vision of just getting kiddos outside, well, that's bigger than a bunch of friends can do in 1 year. And so policy and working with our elected officials who represent us to really take that next step and empower these communities to lead their own recreational opportunities. And that's what gave birth to the New Mexico Outdoor Equity Fund. We quickly learned that a vision without resources is little more than a hallucination. And again, working with many partners, we needed to make sure that there was resources to get these kiddos out, to empower these communities. We can say that we started with a very what would we call it, Miss Axie? A respectable, modest budget. And after teamwork and after this last legislative session, we've been able to simply show and share what this idea looks like when it's working. And so I'm proud to report that as we were coming out of our legislative session just a couple of months ago, we were able to, what was that, 5 times that resources or 4 times that resources for us, Miss Axie, and for our youth. So very excited to be part of this momentum that continues to grow. We have also seen our partners over in California and states in Colorado begin to think about what their outdoor equity fund could and should look like. And that said, I'm also privileged to be part of a team from across the nation. And I see on my screen here, Miss Angelou. So just want to acknowledge the Greening Youth Foundation is part of this larger initiative, the Outdoor Future Initiative, that brings together leaders, individuals, and organizations from across the country to build a piece of legislation built off of lived experience and authenticity that's built and founded on trust. So not only is an exciting process to be a part of, but the Outdoor Future Initiative, a fund for underrepresented tribal, urban, and rural equity, will be able to continue to leverage the momentum that a few of these Western states have begun to build, and see how we can, as a nation, really empower our historically overlooked communities to own these outdoor spaces. As a father of 3, and partner to a frontline educator, especially after last year, our outdoors have proven critical to just us making the family work, for sure. And so I will stop there. And Miss Axie, or we might have lost Miss
We may have lost Axie, but I trust that she'll be back soon.
Yes, sir. And so with that, I believe we have a story, a short video that we would like to share with folks that really just show how the New Mexico Outdoor Equity Fund rolled out on the ground, how the rubber met the road. And I'll stop there, if that sounds right.
Ángel, do you have a link to the video? I actually don't have a link to the video.
Oh, yeah, yes. I can find a quick link. Miss Axie I was going to be passing it over for this piece, but yes,
No worries.
Just 1 second. Well, while I do this and to make good use of everybody's time, well, I just saw Miss Angelou. Just check that. I was going to see if there was anything I am missing about the Outdoor Future Initiative as I do some. Sorry, guys, it is taking me. It is not jumping up here.
Hey, it's just fine. And Ángel, if you're able to multitask, can you tell us a little bit more about the sorts of organizations behind the Outdoor Future Initiative and the collective vision for that work?
Yes, sir, absolutely. So the Outdoor, again, Future Initiative is built of a core team of individuals and organizations from across the country. We have folks, the founder of Latino Outdoors, Jose Gonzalez. We have the executive director and president of the Greening Youth Foundation, Ms. Angelou. We have representation from Outdoor Afro, Native Women's Wilderness, Native American College Fund, Rising Routes, Continental Divide Trail Coalition. Who else, Miss? Am I missing any other big hitters, Miss Angelou?
Basu.
Basu, yes, our pro athlete, and really the guy who gets to hang out a lot in the snow, especially these days.
So we wanted to make sure that the organizations that we engaged were representative of all the groups that haven't historically had a seat at the table. So, you know, it's really, as Angel said, the conversations have been really amazing because it's around learning and the fellowship that, you know, comes with that. But we have been, you know, making a lot of progress in terms of, you know, the legislative piece that we're working on. But in addition to that, just really reaching out to partners like the National Park Foundation, who's now going to be supporting some of this work, getting internships. So we're literally at the ground level, but because of the model that we have from New Mexico and you know, and Colorado, we're really excited about how this can scale out for the country. So it's been going pretty well. We meet frequently, and you know, we're literally on the ground doing this work.
And Angela, because we have you here and you're someone I admire and appreciate quite a bit, could you give us, like, with the Outdoor Future Initiative, what would be like a 1-year horizon, a 5-year horizon, and 10-year horizon? What does this ecosystem of programs and partnerships look like in practice?
Yeah, I mean, and he'll jump in, but I mean, I think initially, we're right now for this first year, just really trying to secure resources for the leaders that are really putting in so much work to figure out what the mechanics are for this thing that we are growing and will be scaling out. But I would say 5 years is certainly having a mechanism in place so that resources can be given to different organizations or states, or, you know, and that's another part of what we're working out, how we're going to roll this out. What will the application be, what that process might look like. So the goal is to really have it be something that's self-sustaining, but with, I would say, a mechanism in place so that it is to ensure the inclusivity of, you know, tribal governments, like across the board. And because it's one of its kind, you know, like, it's really important that we don't rush this. So that's kind of one of the things that we realized, that we were very anxious to get this going and get it out there. And we're also, as I mentioned, working on a legislative piece with Senator Heinrich, right, Angel? But I think that we all realize that, you know, as this is, you know, conceivably precedent setting, you know, that we really want to be strategic and intentional about every step of the way. So we have like Jessica Loya, and, you know, we have just such amazing people on this team that are really building out what this strategic plan might look like in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Angelou. And absolutely, Senior Senator Martin Heinrich from the state of New Mexico has committed to empower this group based and rooted on lived experiences to introduce the New Mexico Outdoor Equity Fund, or I'm sorry, the National Outdoor Future Initiative, to support initiatives like the New Mexico Outdoor Equity Fund. And sir, with that, I have the video now. If
Good.
Yes.
Awesome. And on how I see on this page, there are a few different videos. Which one would you like me to show?
It's going to be the Hermit's Peak Watershed Alliance one. Yep, that one to the left.
This one?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Great. Let me just make sure we have some audio here. On how is audio coming through on your end?
No, sir.
Okay.
The video that we're about to see was part of a number of videos. As we all learned, we had to change the way we organized and engaged and educated our elected officials. And so this is only one of those tactics that we deployed during 2020. And the tactics were easy, right? It was elevating and amplifying those that had everything to lose. And so,
the Guyanus River, it's really just a creek, but it's the source of life. It's why Las Vegas is here. I grew up here in Las Vegas, New Mexico. Ended up marrying the boy across the street, so I'm related to a good half the town. Feel connected to the land and the people here, mostly because of all the outdoor experiences that I had growing up here. It's always my home. My husband grew up fishing with his family here, as I did, and we found fly fishing together when we were really young and first married in our early 20s. We got lucky enough to have the experience, and we want to share that. Fishing in general is already passed down in Hispanic communities. Having access to fly fishing, though, there seems to be a barrier, and we have about 3 times the poverty level of the nation here in Las Vegas. No, I don't know anyone that can afford a fly fishing trip. So I think there's something about having access to the gear and then the instruction. When we have equipment and we can show and we can fish right here and teach the simple techniques, then it breaks through that barrier. Realizing that there's this fascinating world right in our backyard helps us all to feel more proud of it and then have more respect.
In the spring of 2019, community organizers and visionary leaders joined forces to create the first of its kind grant program that deliberately works to connect overlooked communities with the great outdoors. 2020 undoubtedly came with its challenges, and yet community organizations continued the important work to cultivate and create community. Thank you to the New Mexico Outdoor Equity Fund for empowering local organizations to continue the hard work of breaking down barriers and creating access for the next generation of New Mexicans.
So Ángel, as I watched that, and I had the chance to connect with Elizabeth earlier this year and learn about the program. For those of us on the call who are from local organizations or state organizations or even federal agencies, where do we start with building a sort of partnership like that along the Gallinas River and building a program that's not parachuted from the top down, but actually integrated with the community and their needs and their culture from the ground up?
Oh, that's a great question. And let me make sure I'm muted. Yes. And that's what's so exciting about the Outdoor Equity Fund, right? Is that it can really empower communities. It can help pay for anything from appropriate footwear to renting the van that you pile all these kids in, or to purchasing those snacks, to really break down all those barriers. I mean, I can tell you, me personally, I'm a first generation Mexican American, grew up in a family of laborers. And so the last thing my parents wanted to do was take me outside on their free time, right? It wasn't until I became a father that I realized that it's not only affordable to go on a hike with your kiddo, right? You pack a little sandwich, throw it in a backpack, and you spend an afternoon. And as we started to wanted to continue to see what else outside we could do together. There are some real equipment barriers and just, again, putting fuel in the gas tank. And so that's what's so exciting about the New Mexico Outdoor Equity Fund. So exciting what our colleagues over in California and Colorado are doing, because they are first beginning with their community, seeing what their needs are, rather like you just said, parachuting in and trying to provide solutions that come from a beltway that is not rooted in community, for sure, which is exciting. And then what is helping root the Outdoor Future Initiative. Absolutely. And I see we have Miss Axie back.
Actually, it's great to have you back.
Apologies.
We just had a chance to showcase the Gallinas River program, and I'd love to hear your reflections on, the best practices for nurturing these sort of community-oriented, community-centric programs from the ground up, and what you've seen across the state of New Mexico that could be replicated elsewhere. And as Axie's answering, if you have other questions or thoughts, feel free to add them in the chat.
That sounds great. Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Ángel. I apologize about that. I'm sure people can relate to internet going off, and really it was just a ploy to give the floor to Ángel, who's way more articulate than I am anyway. So thank you, Ángel. Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. I view it from this chair that I sit in as a state agency. A lot of the work that I view us doing is stepping back and trying to think about how the investment from the state can best enable groups that are already doing this really great work, like Nuestra Tierra, to maybe expand their capacity to get more kids outside rafting on the Rio, whatever it is, because there are so many experts and leaders in this space already. And I think the best work the state can do is follow communities' leads on that, no matter what it looks like. And I think it looks, there's no cookie cutter approach, right? It looks different in each community, in each municipality, in each county. And how I view the Outdoor Equity Fund really is following the lead of those nonprofit executive directors, the tribal council, the county leadership, and helping put more resources on the ground to expand their capacity to do the work that they're already doing. So that's my quick top line overview. I think you see that time and time again. If you were potentially introduced to Elizabeth Juarez of the Hermit's Peak Watershed Alliance, you can see that work in action. She knows what's going on in Las Vegas. She knows what is best for the kids in that area. And that's what I think is so beautiful about the Outdoor Equity Fund, is that it's a streamlined approach to building some of that capacity of the work that people like Elizabeth are already doing every day throughout the state of New Mexico.
What I hear you saying, Axie, go ahead, Ángel.
Yes, absolutely. And I was just going to add that something, as we're all developing our own state equity funds, right? Something that we learned, because we're all learning, especially as we create new initiatives like this one, is that even in the policy and in this legislation, we wanted to be very specific that these resources were to be prioritized for tribal, rural, and urban communities to make sure, again, that the rubber was hitting the road the way it had been envisioned. But I will stop there. I just want.
So what I hear from both of you is great value in specificity, who we're trying to meet and how and why. Axie saying, like, there are already experts on these matters and they live within the communities. And so it may be sort of counterintuitive for state and local governments to take an approach that's more hands-off, but ultimately leads to better and more community-centric outcomes for these folks. And I think that's a frame shift for folks who come from the public sector, to be willing to put more control, power, and guidance in the hands of the communities. But as we can see in a program like this, the outcomes are really impressive and meaningful. We've got about 7 minutes left in this conversation, and I wonder if other folks on the call have questions that arise from what we've heard from Axie and Ángel, or other thoughts they'd like to share.
Hi, I just had a quick question regarding pushback. So did you all encounter, what kind of barriers did you encounter when you were getting this off the ground?
Ángel, I can take a stab initially, but I think you'd probably give maybe some of that broader look at the initial hurdles to that legislation when it was first introduced. Thank you for the great question. This is something that I grapple with daily, and there's been a steady drumbeat of that pushback, even though I think it was most pronounced when this legislation was first introduced. And that's where I think Ángel's insight would be really valuable. What I would hear a lot is, why are we investing in getting kids outside? It's free. You can just go right out your door. There are no barriers. This idea of barriers is a construct, and the state's money is better off being put elsewhere. And I think there's some very legitimate needs in the state of New Mexico where some of that state money needs to go towards our traditional public education space. Sure, yes, but this is also necessary, and that's the argument that we have made. And I think that Ángel and some of the original visionaries behind the Outdoor Equity Fund have successfully made. So I've actually heard that become much less pronounced in the past few years. And I think it's because you're seeing, and this is specifically from a lawmaker standpoint, you're seeing some of these lawmakers see the Outdoor Equity Fund in action in their districts, and they're realizing, oh, this is incredibly valuable. And I personally don't think it should necessarily take that to see it happen in their districts. I think I would hope some of it would come earlier, but it's also really heartening to see that legislative mark of confidence. And that played out in funding this year in the legislative session. The Outdoor Equity Fund has has more than 3 times the funding it had last year. And that's in large part because of that shift from a lawmaker's perspective. So that's one kind of sliver of how I would answer that. Anything else you would add, Ángel?
Yeah, I was taking notes and kind of nodding my head, amongst trusted friends here, guys. And I'm just going to be honest. The biggest hurdles we had were our elected officials. Some of them. I can tell you personally, I was told, even eye contact back when we were allowed to meet in person, was that equity was a fad, that the word equity was a fad, and that it wasn't going to be there next legislative session. And also that barriers were nothing but talking points, because that these folks could just go outside and be in the wild. I can tell you, these same electeds, these same leaders were the ones just in our last legislative session talking about why we should increase the budget, because they had the opportunity to see again for themselves and hear from these authentic voices like Miss Elizabeth and the youth and the power that she was building over in Las Vegas, New Mexico. A community that is off the I-25 corridor, a community that is often forgotten. And that's when these elected officials kind of got in line, right? And as a parent, we're encouraged by good behavior. And so we want to keep encouraging our electeds. And so I'll stop there. That was definitely when we saw that shift and roll over. Yes.
Thanks so much, Ángel. And I think time for one more question. Jasmine, would you be willing to ask that question in person?
Yeah, so hi, my name is Jasmine Castillo. I am a resource assistant from the Forest Service, and I'm originally from Nebraska. So this question kind of goes back to like my question about what kind of advice do you have about breaking barriers in areas that are predominantly privately owned, especially coming from the Midwest. And so that was a big barrier that I had of getting outdoors, of that there's not a lot of public lands to explore and things like that.
I can jump in first with one case study, and then I don't mean to interrupt, Ángel. I'll make it quick and pass it off. So I live in Taos County, and there's a really interesting collaboration going on here between the Forest Service, between several dozen homeowners, between the private utility, and between a nonprofit that owns a swath of land. All of this is connected on the northern border of Taos Pueblo. And so you have Pueblo leadership and then this other coalition coming together on forest restoration and outdoor recreation access, primarily for young people with an eye towards nurturing stewardship and building in ecology lessons for these kids, primarily high schoolers. So I cite that as just a microcosm that is probably familiar to many of us of collaborations. That's how we get it done. I know we use that word often, but it to me is really kind of the heart of it. Of if you have the right partner, that right private landowner, you can continue to nurture that restoration message. And I think it can be even more powerful when you're bringing in this youth message, trying to get kids outside and seeing the true impact that this land can have on them. So that's one quick way I'd answer it. I also would say we're really grateful for a lot of the public land managers in the state of New Mexico, the Forest Service, National Park Service, BLM, are wonderful partners and certainly enables access when we're able to work with everyone on the ground in individual districts and regions. Ángel?
Yes, Ms. Axie, thank you for the question, Miss Yasmin. I had to Google quickly how much public land Nebraska had, and you guys only have 800,000 acres, and so that's a big deal. That's something real, right? Something that we don't feel here in the state of New Mexico because we have millions of public acres. So great question. I will also tell you that here for Frontera communities, I can tell you for my abuela, she's not going to hike into the wilderness for me, right? But just being outside is also a discada at the park. I can tell you our parks and public spaces are most packed during Easter because our families are so big that they go to these big open spaces to celebrate together. And so, I think, yes, let's keep the vision big. Let's keep it strong, and also understand that we can take baby steps to create community, right? Simply creating access to parks or other waterways. I can tell you that video there was filmed in the heart of Las Vegas, the community, on a little, on a creek that runs through right the middle of town. And so the Outdoor Equity Fund and programs like it we don't need to get 12 miles back in, right? We can enjoy our community, and these resources just help empower us to help redefine what wilderness, what community, and what open spaces can look like. But I'll stop there, and I hope that was at least pointing in the right direction, Ms. Yasmin. Yes.
Thank you.
That was fantastic.